Hello and welcome to one of the most epic episodes in Movies You Miss podcast history.
Yes, indeed. So excited for the epicness that we will be discussing today.
I'm Vee.
And I'm John.
And we are two industry veterans who love to recommend movies to you every week without spoiling them.
Not one spoiler in now 101 episodes. Even though we did do a recap of the Oscars, and that's kind of a spoiler episode, but not really if you watch the Oscars.
Well, we always promise to not spoil movies, not award shows, so we're still good.
That is touché indeed.
And as John mentioned, we are hot off the presses from the 2024 Oscars. And to celebrate that, or at least keep that party going, we picked two Best Picture Oscar winners from history this week.
Yes, we did. Similar to last year, we did Oscar winners before the Oscars. This year we're doing them after the Oscars. And I can't wait. I'm really excited about this because, V, I hadn't seen yours and you hadn't seen mine.
That's right, and I believe they are the two most epic movies we've ever picked.
That is most epically correct.
In terms of time, scale, extras, production.
Oh, yes. Grandeur, everything. Pretty much everything. It is, this will be the most epic episode until we get to the next epic episode.
And we'll let you know when that comes. But before we start discussing these picks of the week, we love to discuss the movies we saw in theaters this week.
Yes, or on streaming.
That's right.
And V, did you end up watching anything new this week?
Unfortunately, I was traveling a little bit this week, so I didn't get a chance. But the nice thing is I've heard some good things from you about a certain streaming movie that I am excited to watch in the near future.
Oh, yes. I did watch two new movies over the last week. They were both on streaming. One is going to shock our audience because it was a Netflix movie that I enjoyed. This is a movie my wife actually wanted to watch, so we watched it together. This was the new Millie Bobby Brown, Ray Winston, Robin Wright, fantasy adventure Damsel.
Was it any good?
It was, unfortunately, a very entertaining movie. I only say that because of my Netflix issues, but it was actually a lot of fun. I had absolutely no expectations. The special effects were cool, the story was pretty fun, and Millie Bobby Brown was a lot of fun to watch, and Robin Wright was great. I think Angela Bassett's also in it, so I would recommend it to anybody that likes fantasy, Game of Thrones, anything dragonish. My wife was saying if people like reading, Iron Sky, or Iron Flame and the Court of Roses and Thorns or something like that. Those are the types of audiences that movie's really geared towards, but I enjoyed it for what it was.
I was very excited when you texted me a couple days ago and told me you enjoyed the movie because it had been on my list when I saw the initial trailer, and so I'm very excited to watch it on Netflix.
Yeah, again, it's highly recommended by myself and my wife included. She very much enjoyed it. And then the other film I watched was a movie I actually wanted to see in theaters, but it didn't last very long here in town, so I waited for streaming, and I'm glad I watched it. It starred Nicolas Cage. This is Dream Scenario. This movie is super, super weird. Amy watched it with me, and when it ended, I asked her, so this is one of your new favorite movies, right? She goes, no, that was one of the stupidest movies I've ever seen. It's definitely different. It has its funny moments. It goes a little bit on the twisted side. Ari Aster was a producer on it, and it had a very strong Ari Aster vibe to it, more on like Beau is Afraid, not so much Hereditary or Midsommar, but very interesting, very surrealistic type of a movie. And I would recommend if you like really weird movies and are a Nicolas Cage fan. He did something very different with his voice. He didn't have the Nicolas Cage voice, and from what I read, it was Nicolas Cage kind of came up with the wardrobe and the hairstyle. And again, I enjoyed it. It was about an hour and a half. Again, if you like weird, somewhat twisted movies, give this one a shot.
And where is it streaming?
It is currently streaming on HBO Max.
Alrighty. Well, those are two very different movies for our audience to pick whatever they prefer.
Indeed.
And even though now we are in the triple digits, we are staying with the pattern. And because this is an odd episode, John, I believe you go first.
I shall, and boy, oh boy, am I ever so excited to discuss this film. This is the third time I've seen this movie. I have the double VHS of this film. I've watched it twice on double VHS, and it looks great. Now, granted, this was when I had a 41-inch HD TV, but I got to watch it on my 4K TV, even though this was not a 4K restoration, which was a little sad, but it still looked amazing on my brand new TV that I have in here. I am talking about the 1959 massively epic film running at 3 hours and 42 minutes long with an overture and an intermission starring Charlton Heston. This is Ben-Hur. Now, if you haven't seen Ben-Hur, that's fine. It's one of those movies that you'll get around to, I hope, especially after listening to this episode, because once you hear what went down while making this film, it is truly one of, and we're going to say it all episode, the most epic productions and most epic films that I've definitely ever seen. Now, this is pre-2005, I would say. This is pre-Christopher Nolan. This is pre-Inception, Interstellar, Tenet. This is pre-Lord of the Rings epic status, stuff like that. However, this one is relying solely on practicality. And the fact that it is all practical is an absolute mind fuck.
It was a first-time watch for me. I'm so thrilled you had it on the list because it's been on my to-watch list for, I don't know, a decade or so.
All right.
Because of how renowned it is, and I'm very excited to get into it. And because of the practicality, I don't think new movies compare.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. When I finished watching it, I had tears in my eyes. I applauded. I yelled at the TV watching this movie. It really is... It's something to be seen, and I know we've said that about a lot of movies, but this is one of those movies, and very similarly to V, your pick this week, these movies are so well respected and renowned, not just in the production world, like where you and I come from, but people that just like movies and love movies won't ever shut up about these two movies because they're so epic in scale and just, they're fantastic movies too. The stories are great. The characters are great. The acting is otherworldly. I mean, it's fantastic. I can't wait to get into both of these films. So without further ado, why don't I break Ben-Hur down for everybody? This movie's 3 hours and 42 minutes. I'm going to break it down in 3 minutes and 42 seconds. V, start the timer.
All right.
I'm kidding. Because it's going to take me 25 hours to get through the explanation of this movie. No, not really. This movie, like I said, stars Charlton Heston, also stars Jack Hawkins, Stephen Boyd, Haya Hararate. Now, please forgive me if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I believe you have passed on, but if any of your family hears me pronounce this incorrectly, please forgive me. Hugh Griffith and Frank Tring. Screenplay written by Carl Thunberg. This is based off of a Lee Wallace novel from 1880 called A Story of the Christ. And it definitely is, I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a story of the Christ. Jesus has a subplot in this movie.
Yes.
We do meet Mary and Joseph very early on. We hear about how Jesus was a carpenter while the Romans are walking through Jerusalem. At one point, we do see Jesus from the back, etc. So Jesus is kind of all around. But this movie is set in the time of the Romans taking over the Jewish people in Jerusalem and Nazareth. And the movie opens up with us meeting Messala, played by Stephen Boyd. He has been elected by the Roman emperor as the tribune of Jerusalem. He's having a conversation with a Roman soldier about how he plans to rule in Jerusalem and get the Jewish people to follow his lead and respect him, etc., etc. This Roman soldier's telling him it really can't be done. You're going to have to really lay a heavy hand down, lay the hammer down, make an example of these people, etc., etc. We also end up finding out that Messala has a friend in Jerusalem because Messala grew up in this town of Jerusalem. Messala was born to a Roman mother and father, and in his teenage years ended up going off to Rome to become a Roman soldier and fight for the Emperor of Rome, leaving behind everybody in Jerusalem, including his friend Judah Ben-Hur, played by Charlton Heston. So they reconnect as adults. Tribune Messala is very happy to see him, or so we think. While they're having a discussion about how Judah really feels that Messala should kind of get the fuck out of Jerusalem, things kind of start to get a little sour between the two of them. So a little later on, a few days later, in fact, Messala and Judah are having another conversation about how Messala really hopes that Judah can overlook the animosity between them and have Judah help Messala keep the people at bay, keep them peaceful, and also get them on the side of obeying the Roman law that has now pretty much swept across Jerusalem and Nazareth. And this is actually a great moment that I think everybody should listen to because it really pissed me off when Messala said this.
I'm next in authority to the governor, and you're my friend.
I'm a Jew.
You're like a Roman. What have you in common with a rabble that makes trouble here?
Rabble? They're my people. I'm one of them.
Be wise, Judah. It's a Roman world. If you want to live in it, you must become part of it.
You've changed.
I've grown up. I've seen the world since I left Jerusalem. I've seen Rome. And I tell you, Judah, it is no accident that one small village on the Tiber was chosen to rule the world.
Your legions.
It wasn't just our legion. Other countries have armies, fine armies. I know, I fought them. Oh, no. No, it was fate that chose us to civilize the world. And we have. Our roads and our ships connect every corner of the earth. Roman law, architecture, literature are the glory of the human race.
I believe in the future of my people.
Of course you do, and you can help them.
How?
You're an aristocrat. Your name and your family's name is honored. You're a prince among your people. You're rich and you're powerful. Your reputation is stainless. And the people would listen if you were to speak out against rebellion. You're to persuade your people that their resistance to Rome is stupid. It is worse than stupid, futile. For it can end in only one way, extinction for your people.
I'm against violence. Everyone knows this. I've spoken against it. I shall do so again.
Then we're agreed. And now for our toast. It's dreadful wine, by the way.
It's especially fermented for the Roman army.
You're very cruel to your conquerors.
So after this, Masala says to him, "You're either with me or you're against me, Judah." And then Judah looks at him dead in the eyes and says, "Then I'm against you." And I love that moment because, Heston looks just so ready to just jump out of his skin and just attack this guy, but he's obviously not going to do that because he's a pretty peaceful guy himself, and he still kind of has a little bit of a feeling that maybe under all of this political bullshit that Masala is spewing, that there is still a friendship there. Fast forward a few days later, Judah's with his mother and his sister high up top, watching a bunch of these Roman soldiers come into their city of Jerusalem. And very unfortunately, where Judah's sister is standing, the roof tiles are not as secure as they should be. One of these tiles falls, hits the new governor, and knocks him out cold. Which is a great moment, but, of course, at this point, we're kind of seeing a bit of a downfall now. So Masala sees who's up there and runs upstairs with some soldiers and really doesn't say anything about it. He just kind of lets everybody get arrested. And Judah is very much about this was an accident. This was not deliberate. You got to understand, you know us, you know my family, you know me, you know I would never do this, etc., etc. Judah and his mother and sister are taken away. Masala then looks at the tiles and does notice that, in fact, oh yeah, this probably was an accident. But he's not going to let it sit as an accident. Judah's brought to his chambers, and he says to him, "By using you as an example, I'm going to state my authority over you and your people. You're now going to be sent into slavery." Judah says to him, "You know what? You can do all of this that you want. Just leave my sister and my mother alone. But believe me, when I get back," and Masala says, "Oh, you're never coming back." Ooh, I hated that moment so much. Judah's very, of course, distraught about all of this. Judah is then sent into slavery. We end up meeting him 3 years later on a ship that he is now a rower of. And I love this sequence. If you've seen this movie, you know the sequence I'm talking about. Then we are treated to a fantastic water sequence battle between the Romans and the Macedonians. It was really, really awesome. William Wyler actually had found out that during the shooting of some of these scenes for this attack, that one of their background actors had a missing foot. So he ended up getting the production department, the prop department, to fashion a fake foot so that they could actually kind of break it and have a bone protruding out of it, which I thought was pretty cool.
That's cool.
You can see it for a brief moment in that sequence. So this whole battle's happening on the water, and at one point the consul is flown out of the ship and pretty much is lost at sea. Judah jumps in, saves his life, and then the consul is pretty much like, "Well, you saved my life, so now I kind of got to treat you a little bit better than I have been treating you." Gives them water once they get on the ship, and fast forward another year or so later, and the consul has now adopted Judah Ben-Hur as his son because he's been winning the chariot races for him, and he no longer has any heirs to his throne. So now Judah Ben-Hur is going to carry the name of the consul for Rome, but Judah is still hell-bent on getting back to Jerusalem. And for the rest of the movie, Judah Ben-Hur is trying to get back to Jerusalem to free his wrongfully imprisoned mother and sister from Masala, and we are introduced to a whole handful of characters, and we end up finding out that majority of these people actually support him on his quest for revenge against Masala, the Roman tribune of Jerusalem. And that is pretty much the breakdown of Ben-Hur. So V, before I get into the epic production notes that I have from this movie, what did you think?
As we've said, it was my first time watching it. It is unbelievable how grand this movie is.
Yes, you have to see to believe, honestly.
And I'm so grateful that we have the technology to watch these movies remastered on quality TVs with surround sound or sound bars that are really, really high quality as well, because it makes you feel like you're there. It also gives you the full experience because these movies are so large scale with everything, including the running time, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I love the costumes. I love the stunts, all of the background, all of the horses, the chariot race. I've known about this, obviously, for decades because of my love of movies and because it's such a classic scene.
Right.
But I had no idea just how grand of a scale this race is. And again, just how epic it is, right?
Yeah, no, you can only say how epic it is so many times, but it's so true.
So is.
Like it is. It's one of the greatest films that I have ever seen. I will never forget my first 2 times watching it. I watched it, I think, within like 2 years of the first time I had watched it. I watched it the second time. I remember when it ended, I just like, I got up and like walked around my apartment and was like, my God, like, they really don't do this anymore, you know? Like movies even like Godzilla -1, movies like, and just as an example, you know, like a lot
Return
of
of the
destruction,
King.
a lot of Return of the King, yeah, a lot of visual effects in that movie, a lot of CGI. Ben-Hur is practical. It's real people. Computers didn't exist then. There was no way of just, you know, copy-pasting these crowds of people in certain scenes of this movie, including the scenes where they're in the boat and they're rowing. Those are all real men rowing, and it's mind-boggling. Watching it this time around, I think it's been almost 10 years since I last saw it. And I could not take my eyes off the screen because it was just incredible to think. Back during the production of this movie, which took place in 1958, wow. I can only imagine how we'll get into it. I know how long it took to make the movie, but you know, for those that don't know, you are in for a treat of classic Hollywood production madness.
It's nothing short of a masterpiece. It absolutely holds up.
Oh, yeah.
I will be watching this movie repeatedly in the future. I will be introducing it to other people.
Yes.
I can understand why it's often regarded as one of the best movies ever made, because it is.
It is. It absolutely is.
And it's actually the first movie I've ever seen with Charlton Heston starring. I've seen him in movies from the 90s and early 2000s when he's more of a supporting character, like in True Lies, when he heads up the spy agency that Arnold Schwarzenegger works for.
Yes.
But I haven't seen these old epics that he's starred in, and it was nothing short of a monumental experience to watch this film. And I'm so grateful you introduced me to it finally.
Oh, I'm glad that you feel that way, and I'm always glad to hear that you enjoyed the movie that I picked. Charlton Heston was definitely a force on the screen, and he was only 35 when he made this movie.
Oh my God, he looked like he was 53.
He did. I know, it's crazy. And I think that, I don't know if that's because they shot it in Rome and in Spain where the sun was just beating the fuck down on everybody and their skin was just getting brown, but he did look a lot older, and it's crazy to think about that. His mother, who's played by Marta Scott, she was 45 when this movie was made. She was actually only 10 years older than Charlton Heston, but 3 years prior, she also played his mother in The 10 Commandments. So it was kind of fun to see them both back together as mother and son in 2 different movies. Yeah.
Well, people always looked a lot older back then. There was hard living back then, right? And no sunscreen.
Yes. No, that's true. Yeah, the makeup is great. Interestingly enough, about the makeup and about a lot of the looks, Stephen Boyd, when he was cast as Masala, ended up growing a beard because he was like, I'm going to have a beard, going to be a little bit more dominant looking. And of course, historically inaccurate because the Romans were very strapping, young, beautiful men. So he ended up having to shave his beard because that would have been historically inaccurate. And he also ended up putting in brown contacts in his eyes. A lot of the actors that played a lot of the Romans in the movie wore brown contacts.
Glass contacts, because this was 1950s. Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. Stephen Boyd has actually said that he had a lot of problems with the contact lenses that he had to wear, and he actually needed a few days rest from actually opening his eyes so much because of the fact that they were glass. This is brutal.
And the man looks like Dominic West.
Yes, he does indeed. And speaking of the locations, the desert sequences were actually originally going to be shot in Libya, but Libya is a Muslim country, and this movie is a bit of a Christian type of a theme. The government of Libya actually pushed MGM and the production out. They ended up shooting the desert scenes in Spain instead.
Which I didn't know that there were a lot of Christian undertones to this film. I thought it was a pure old school Roman story with a really cool chariot race in it. So when Jesus showed up in the beginning, I was like, whoa, what's going on?
I know, it was a little crazy. The first 2 times I watched it, I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't remember that part because it's just so minimal, you know?
Yeah, it's certainly one of the first stories or movies I've ever seen where Jesus is a side character.
Exactly. The set of Jerusalem in Ben-Hur is actually a 10-block, historically accurate reproduction of how they think it looked.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Again, everything's practical.
Yes, indeed. And here's a little bit more practicality for you. 300 sets were built for this movie.
Whoa!
300 sets. 5 years of research for these practical sets to be built. 14 months of set building.
Whoa!
In total for this movie. Now, this part is intense because, V, you and I know how long days can go on set. We also know that certain movies, like one of my favorites, Singing in the Rain, stretched to 19 hours on some of the days that they shot. Ben-Hur, the production lasted for 9 months, 16-hour days, for 6 days a week for the entire 9 months of production.
Oh, wow.
Brutal.
That's brutal.
Brutal. Now, William Wyler actually had a bit of a reputation for not being the nicest director, but everybody really respected him because he had a great eye and impeccable taste, and every actor that worked with him really did respect his work, especially after seeing the finished product. Charlton Heston actually wrote about William Wyler that he doubted that William Wyler actually liked actors because he was always impatient with actors, and the only answer that Charlton Heston said for the reason for that was because of his impeccable timing, his taste, and his absolute need for perfection. And, you know, I can't really argue with anything like that. Like, anytime I am on a set with a well-respected director, I can understand being particular, especially if you have a budget of $15 million, which Ben-Hur had a budget of. And, you know, you're working with Charlton Heston, a guy that's been around.
Yeah, there's a difference between running a tight ship and being a dick.
That's true. That's very true. There are a couple other actors that were in consideration to play Ben-Hur. William Wyler already knew that Charlton Heston was going to play Ben-Hur, but the studio threw a couple names at Wyler just to see if he would maybe budge on Charlton Heston, which he did not. Burt Lancaster was one.
Nice. Yep, I could see that.
I definitely could. Marlon Brando.
No.
I don't think I could see, especially with his weird voice. I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really been a big Marlon Brando fan. I mean, I like The Godfather, but it's not because of him, you know?
Yeah, same. Exact same feeling. Oh my gosh. And this is going to come up again later. That's perfect.
Okay. And Paul Newman was interested and suggested to play Ben-Hur. And I have only really ever seen Paul Newman play, as you've said in the past, subdued characters and not anything super grandiose, super intense, you know, yelling and this kind of thing. So I don't know if I could have seen Paul Newman play Judah Ben-Hur.
I don't think I could either because I've seen him play a prisoner in Cool Hand Luke. And like the title implies, he was pretty chill the whole time.
He was very cool. Oh, there you go. This other actor was very interested in playing Ben-Hur. He really, really wanted the role. Wyler was, again, set on Charlton Heston. This actor would later go on to make his own epic with another director that we've discussed here at Movies You Missed podcast. We've also mentioned this movie one time before, but it wasn't pronounced correctly because we discussed it in your pick for Clueless.
Spartacus.
Spartacus, indeed. Spartacus. Kirk Douglas was very interested in playing Judah Ben-Hur. He didn't get the role, so when he went to go make Spartacus, he kind of did it as a little bit of a revenge and tried to compete with the grandioseness of Ben-Hur. Now, I have seen Spartacus, and Spartacus is a very good movie. Ben-Hur is far better.
I do always love the story, though, when people go and do their own very successful thing as an act of revenge.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And yeah, nothing against Spartacus. I almost said Spartacus. And nothing against Spartacus. It is a good movie. Stanley Kubrick did a great job. It's got some epic moments. There's nothing more epic, in my opinion, than Ben-Hur. And I don't mean, to take away from your movie that's coming up very shortly, but there's just something about Ben-Hur that is just...
Another level.
Another level of epic. Oh, and one other actor, before I get into my, everybody's favorite part of the movie. This actor actually did a screen test to play Masala. He didn't get it, and I've seen some of this actor in a serious role before he went on to do Wrongfully Accused, Scary Movie 3, Mr. Magoo. Leslie Nielsen was almost given the role of Masala. He did a screen test in costume, but it did not end up going to him. It went to Stephen Boyd. And apparently, there's a documentary out there where you can see that screen test. Oh. And I've got to find that documentary.
YouTube it.
Yes, I think it came out in 1994, so I'm definitely going to have to do that. So before I get into the highest grossing films and all that fun stuff of the year 1959 and how many Oscars Ben-Hur won, we are going to discuss one of the most epic scenes in all of cinematic history, the chariot circus race sequence of Ben-Hur. Now, the arena for the chariot race was built with the help of 1,000 laborers beginning in January of 1958. It was 2,000 feet long, 65 feet wide, and took up 18 acres.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and 40,000 tons of white sand was imported from Mexico.
All the way from Mexico? Where was it built?
In Rome.
Holy shit.
Yeah, pretty nuts. 82 different horses were used, all flown in from Croatia.
Please tell me all of them lived.
They did, actually. They all did. There were very minimal injuries during the sequence of shooting the chariot sequence. There was actually an infirmary that was built on set just in case anything went horribly wrong. There were very minor injuries, a couple broken wrists here and there. Stephen Boyd ended up getting really blistered hands and wrists because of how hot it was out there. Other than that, everybody else pretty much just got sunburned. Originally, David Lean was approached to direct the chariot sequence. David Lean sounds familiar, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
He declined it because he felt William Wyler was going to do a fantastic job with it, and he fucking sure did.
Yeah.
Yakima Canute was the stuntman that coordinated the chariot sequence. Charlton Heston had known how to ride a chariot with 2 horses because of shooting the 10 Commandments, so he had to actually learn for about a month before shooting how to run and work a chariot with 4 horses.
Okay.
Pretty crazy. There were 3 65mm cameras, all using 140mm lenses because the 200mm lens could not focus in any more than 50 feet. There was a lot of close-ups in this sequence, I'm sure you remember, V.
Oh, yeah.
And only one of the 65mm cameras was destroyed in production.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Now, here is a bombshell. How many background do you think were in this scene, V?
3,000.
15,000.
Holy shit.
15,000 background in that 18-acre section of the world. And V, how long do you think it took to shoot the chariot sequence?
2 weeks.
5 weeks long of production on the chariot sequence alone.
I believe
Absolutely insane. Yes, absolutely just madness. Everybody's real. None of it is fake. It's all happening. You see it for real. Granted, yes, there are some stuntmen, and there needed to be.
Of course,
but my gosh, it is absolutely convincing. I screamed my ass off watching the chariot sequence this time around. I even cried. Part of the reason why was because I was definitely invested in Ben-Hur's story. I really, rooting for the good guy, right? And I think another reason was because I was just completely overwhelmed by the fact that this was all done practically with real horses, real guys, several cameras, 15,000 extras, just out of control.
I loved that Roman chariot races had medics, and they would run out there with the stretchers.
Yeah, that was great.
Really fantastic. Another reason I love this scene as much as I do is because there's no music. You only hear the galloping horses, the crowd, the chariots banging together, the whips. It made it so visceral. It was absolutely unbelievable.
I loved the fact that there was no sound, and this will likely kind of make this even more epic for you in production-wise. The entire sequence was shot MOS. Now, for those that don't know what MOS is, they did not roll sound while shooting this. So all of the sound is post-production.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Probably because there's so much going on and there's so much direction that had to be made. It makes sense that they're like, you know what, forget it. We can't do sound because we're trying to coordinate everything.
Definitely. And going back to the horses, all of the horses did their takes in one take. So a lot of the takes that you see are oneers and doners because it was so damn hot and they did not want to abuse the animals. So hats off to everybody. You're probably all dead. But hats off to you anyway in the afterlife for taking care of them horses while shooting the most epic practical racing sequence ever. There is a remake directed by Tamir Bekmambetov from a few years ago. I refuse to see it. I do love Tamir Bekmambetov, but there's no way you can remake Ben-Hur, especially with CGI. No, you just can't.
Do you know who plays Masala in the remake?
Oh, no, who?
He's in one of my picks.
Oh?
Early picks.
Okay.
His name is Johnny Quid. He's a real rock and roller.
Oh, my gosh. No way. Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, he plays Masala in the remake. That's all I know about the remake. I've refused to watch it as well. How do you remake a movie that won that many Oscars?
I know.
So bad.
And that's actually a perfect segue to get into the Oscar wins of Ben-Hur. But real quickly, I'll just reiterate, the budget was $15 million. The worldwide gross of Ben-Hur was $74.4 million. It did pretty good for that kind of budget.
Yeah.
This movie went on to win 11 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Direction, Cinematography, Production Design, Costumes, Sound, Editing, Special Effects, and the Score. And this was the first film to win 11 Oscars. There would be 2 others in the future. Titanic would be one, and Lord of the Rings: Return of the King was the other.
I don't think either of those hold a candle to Ben-Hur now that I've watched it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. As much as I love Titanic, I think Ben-Hur definitely takes the cake. And now for the highest-grossing films of 1959. V, I won't make you guess it because we're discussing it right now. Ben-Hur was the highest-grossing film of 1959. Second highest-grossing film, Shaggy Dog. Third highest-grossing film, V, a pick of yours from several episodes ago, Some Like It Hot.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Number 4th highest-grossing film, Operation Petticoat, which I have seen. My grandmother got me the DVD several years ago. Very entertaining movie. And the 5th highest-grossing film of 1959, a film that my wife loves that she introduced me to when we first started living together, Doris Day in a film called Pillow Talk.
All right. I've seen 2 of the 5.
Fantastic. That is the year 1959. That is the epic Ben-Hur. Watch it. Love it. It's not streaming anywhere, but you can rent it on Apple TV for $3.99. I highly recommend it, and I think V does too.
Absolutely. There were a couple pieces of the movie that I actually thought they could have gone without. I thought the entire epilogue after the race was kind of not needed. But otherwise, man, I love a good revenge film.
Hell yeah. So glad you enjoyed it. Now I think we can get into more desert action and hot sun and discuss your pick this week.
Sounds good. Oh, and one other thing about your movie, I want to make sure that I didn't step over your toes talking about it, but I was very curious about the Roman salute in this movie because it's a salute of fascists with the arm out, palm down.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And
it was very much a Nazi salute.
It was, and I was very curious about it. So that was the one thing about your movie I looked up just because I had to know. Because that's not actually the way Romans saluted, ever. They usually put their closed fists up to their chest. And it was a 17th century painter. This is the only part of your movie that I looked up just because I was so curious.
Okay.
A 17th century painter started painting Romans with that salute.
Oh.
And the Nazis actually adopted that. So it's not authentic. It's actually a misinterpretation, which is why in the 50s it was probably used for this movie.
Sure.
But that's actually not the way Romans saluted, and it made me really happy to know that, of course, the Nazis screwed up history and didn't adopt the right thing.
No, that's crazy. When I was watching it this time, I was like, oh, look at that. It's a Nazi salute. And I thought maybe since this was made in the 50s, this was like a way to really get people to understand that the Romans really were shit people.
That's actually entirely possible, too.
Well, there you go.
Nice. Okay. Just wanted to talk about one more thing about your movie before we moved on, because it's that good.
Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you for dropping that knowledge on me.
Sure. Thank you for introducing me, finally, to Ben-Hur.
Absolutely. And thank you for introducing me to yours. Now, what did you choose this week, V?
We fast-forwarded a couple years into the future to 1962 to the next epic, one of the last epics ever made,
yes.
I think. Peter O'Toole stars as Lawrence of Arabia.
And you know, it really blew me away that this was an introducing Peter O'Toole credit.
It was. He was actually in a couple of little movies before this, but really this was his grand introduction.
That's actually pretty badass. I'm glad to know that.
Yes, and like your movie, as we said, this is a grand adventure, it's epic, and it's also 3 hours and 38 minutes long.
Yeah. 8 hours of movie watching. I love it.
We watched a lot of movies this week.
Yes, we did. But what better way to continue on with the Oscar buzz?
Yes, it was a nice icing on top of the award season cake for us, that's for sure.
Agreed indeed.
This movie opens with Lawrence dying.
I know. I was so surprised at that.
I figured.
It's like, wait a minute. Yeah.
It's actually 1935. T.E. Lawrence is back home in England, and he's riding his motorcycle, a sweet, sweet bike.
Oh, yeah.
So the introduction of this movie is actually his memorial service. And all of these men are leaving St. Paul's Cathedral and discussing T.E. Lawrence the man. And you start to hear all these guys say, I didn't really know him. I met him once. I shook his hand once. I sat down for tea with him once.
Yeah.
But nobody really knew him. Rewind back to the First World War. So this is 1914 to 1918.
Mm-hmm.
Younger T.E. Lawrence is in the British Army as a lieutenant, and he's stationed in Cairo. He's a bit of a misfit. Nobody really likes him. Nobody understands him. He's kind of a wild guy and really not conforming to British rules, especially British military rules.
Yeah.
But there's a man named Mr. Dryden, and he's part of the Arab Bureau, so he's basically an ambassador for Britain. And he has the idea that T. Lawrence should actually go over to Arabia and assess the situation because the Turks have invaded. Again, this is during World War I, so the Turks are actually part of the German-Austrian Axis that is fighting France and Britain. And so the Turks have come across, tried to increase their empire, and now invaded Arabia, and have several key forts that are really messing with Britain. And so now T.E. Lawrence has a new assignment. He's going to Arabia, and this is the start of this grand journey. It becomes an adventure, but in the beginning, it's just a big-ass journey.
Definitely. Oh, yeah.
And it starts off with him having this guide named Tafas, and you're introduced to him, and you think, oh, okay, so he's becoming Lawrence's friend. They're talking over when they're eating and when they're camping in this desert as Tafas is bringing Lawrence to Prince Faisal. And the reason why he's bringing Lawrence to meet him is that he has the largest tribe there, and he actually is the crown prince of Arabia, even though Arabia as it stands is broken up into a bunch of different tribes, and that becomes very crucial to this story.
Oh, yeah. It was... there was so many... And like Ben-Hur, there are so many people that you meet in this movie.
Yes.
And it's crazy to say, but I loved every one of them in both movies. You know, even the bad guys are kind of like, I don't know. I like these people. Maybe it's the acting. Maybe it's because I like the actor and I'm like, there's something endearing about all of them. And, you want to, in a way, you understand what they're saying, but you know that in your right mind can't agree with it.
They're fully fleshed out characters in these movies, and so you can understand them as humans, right?
That's what I was going with. You can understand the humanity behind both of them, but again, with the antagonists, you don't want to.
Yes, exactly. And so you were starting this journey with Lawrence and Tafas, and you're like, okay, well, Tafas is going to guide him. And one day, while they're riding their camels through this very desolate desert, and they finally get to a well, and thank God, because it's basically what saves them.
Yes.
Tafas is unceremoniously killed.
That was so out of control for me.
Was it shocking?
There. Oh, yeah, it absolutely was. Because, watching this movie, and after all the dialogue they're having, that one shot where you see the black dot coming out from the distance, I'm just like, okay, here comes the help. Nope.
Not at all.
But then at the same time, you find out that Lawrence is welcome, just not the other guy.
Yes, again, as I said, this is a very tribal place. And this is where we're introduced to Sharif Ali.
Yes.
And Sharif Ali is actually played by Omar Sharif.
Hey, Dr. Zhivago.
That's right. And Ali actually takes Lawrence the rest of the way to see Prince Faisal. There he meets up with another British officer who is, of course, prim and proper and trying to convince the prince to do the British way, take your people out of here, the Turks are coming, we'll protect you, and it's very much a political play here, right? And you get that sense rather quickly, which is good. And Lawrence is like, man, this guy sucks, right?
Yeah.
He's not following...
In so many words.
Right? He's not following orders. He's not keeping his mouth shut, even though he is told to. And instead, he tells the prince, no, you guys need to band together and start kicking these Turks out of your country.
Colonel Brighton means to put my men under European officers, does he not?
In effect, my lord, yes.
And I must do it. Because the Turks have European guns. But I fear to do it. Upon my soul, I do. The English have a great hunger for desolate places. I fear they hunger for Arabia.
Then you must deny it to them.
You are an Englishman. Are you not loyal to England?
To England and to other things.
To England and Arabia, both? And is that possible? I think you are another of these desert-loving English. Doughty, Stanhope, Gordon of Khartoum. No Arab loves the deserts. We love water and green trees. There's nothing in the desert. No man needs nothing. Or is it that you think we are something you can play with? Because we are a little people, a silly people, greedy, barbarous, and cruel. What do you know, Lieutenant? In the Arab city of Cordoba were 2 miles of public lighting in the streets when London was a village.
Yes. You were great.
9 centuries ago.
Time to be great again, my lord.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
But unfortunately, the Nafud Desert separates them from Aqaba, which is where the Turks' stronghold is. And all of their big, massive guns are pointed at the ocean. And behind them is the Nafud Desert. So it seems like this is an impenetrable, secure location.
Definitely.
And T. Lawrence goes, nah, it's all right. I'm just going to trek the Nafud Desert. And all the Arabs look at him like, this guy's crazy.
It's interesting watching this movie. I almost texted you this, but there were moments that I the one time I texted you was like, this movie's epic as fuck. That was the only time I texted you because I was like an hour and a half in. And it was around this time when he's starting to go through the desert. And then I started thinking about our discussion about The Revenant in the past and how you just feel like you're there. I had to open my fucking window in my theater room because I was getting hot. I was like, this is hot in here. And I needed some fresh air. But then I felt bad because there's Lawrence trekking through with no water. When he decides to turn around and go get...
Right?
Ugh.
Right? Exactly. And this is now the first epic sequence of this movie, where instead of battles, there's actually more trekking and survival in this film. So it's a little bit more subdued film in the beginning than Ben-Hur.
Yes, right.
The prince gives Lawrence 50 men and says it's going to take you 20 days if you survive to get through the Nafud Desert.
Ugh.
Good luck.
Yeah.
And so him and Ali take these 50 men and trek through the desert. And the cinematography in this movie is gorgeous. Every shot is so large scale, and you can feel that they are in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
And desperate, and I get stressed out during the sequence, and I'm drinking a lot of water on my couch because I'm like, oh my God.
I was drinking bourbon and water.
Right?
And I'm just sitting there like, whoa.
They're at the last day, and finally they're getting through it, and they've passed through basically this cast iron skillet of rocks that was cooking them alive, and they only have a half day left to go to a well. And Lawrence looks next to him and realizes there's a camel without a rider.
Yes.
And he says, well, we have to turn around and save him. And Ali goes, are you crazy? We'll all die if we go back. We can't do this. It's written that this man's going to die. It's Qasim, and it's been written that he's going to die. And there's no help for it. We'll risk everyone if we go back. And Lawrence is like, well, screw that. I'm going back, and I'm going to help this man.
Mm-hmm.
And to everyone's objections, he turns around and starts backtracking to find this guy. And he does. And he brings them to the well. He meets up with everyone else later that night. And that's when his legend begins.
Yeah, and that's when you said it just a few seconds ago, but I love the whole, like, it is written, or, that whole thing. It's like, oh, so, maybe there is a prophecy of somebody like Lawrence showing up and helping them actually take over the Turks.
Well, and that's the thing that the Arabs start telling Lawrence, is that he can write his own destiny and no one else can. And that's why they really start to respect him and follow him. And then they attack Aqaba and kick all the Turks out.
Hell yeah.
Which is awesome.
That was so epic. There's that word again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is in the early 1900s, the first 20 years of the 1900s, in fact. And there's no real way to tell the British military that they've now captured this very important military target. And so what does Lawrence do? He's like, well, I'm going to trek across this other desert all the way to Cairo back to my home base so I can tell everyone.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And he does.
So nuts.
And he arrives in Arab robes, and he looks more comfortable than he did when he was in his British military uniform, in fact, in Cairo.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells them what he's done. And the British officers think that this is great. And they send him back to Arabia to keep causing havoc with the Turks.
Hell yeah.
And his legend and reputation grows. He starts blowing up and sabotaging Turkish railways.
Oh, so good. So good.
And he continues to have more and more followers who are, it's basically guerrilla warfare, and he starts uniting these tribes of Arabia. And at this point, his reputation has grown so much that the Turks are really starting to hear about this white man who acts and dresses like an Arab, who's leading all of these men. Lawrence also starts to get rather arrogant about this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about this movie is it's not only an epic adventure, but it's a very psychological character study as well.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that, because at one point, he actually gets captured by some Turkish officers in a small town. They don't recognize him. They don't ever put two and two together, but this is actually where he gets assaulted by Turkish officers.
Mm-hmm.
And it affects him very deeply. And that's why the second half of this movie is really about Lawrence losing his grip on not only his sanity, but also all of the men who are following him.
Right, yeah.
And the rest of the movie follows Lawrence as he is dealing with this trauma, is still trying to help the Arabs, is struggling with his identity because he's British, but he feels more comfortable with the Arabs. And it really all plays out on the backdrop of World War I.
Well, GV, I think when we're done recording this, I'm going to spend 4 hours watching Lawrence of Arabia again.
I'm glad. I'd only seen this movie once before in my 20s when I was crossing films off the AFI Top 100 list. This is listed as one of the top 100 films by the American Film Institute. So is Ben-Hur.
Yes.
As it should be.
Absolutely.
And I love that there are so many similarities between our two films, but they tell the stories a little bit differently. Now, they are both very grand, very large scale, but Lawrence of Arabia takes its time a little bit more. There's a lot of quiet in this movie.
Yes.
There's a lot of almost meditation in this trek that he's making repeatedly across several deserts.
Yeah, no, fully agreed.
There is a lot of time in this movie to take your breath. To
Yes.
really just marinate on this storyline. And I really do like that about it. It's not a slow movie in any sense of the word.
Definitely not.
Both these movies are over 3 hours long. Neither one wastes a single shot.
Oh, completely agree. Yeah. I like the fact that there's a couple of moments to take a breath, especially after some of the battles. It's, it's not like, all right, a battle's over, let's go to another one, one. Like a lot of war movies are these days. It just, like you said, the marinating, the understanding, the watching, the being there for it, and really feeling like you're on one of those camels during the treks across the desert.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. There's a moment when it's just Lawrence and these two guys that have been wanting to follow him, and he gives them the permission to at one point when they go to an oasis. Very unfortunately, one of them dies, and I just grabbed my pillow. I could not believe. It's so intense and so fantastic. And I remember when this came out, I think last year, the 4K DVD was released, and I'm in a couple of 4K groups, and everybody was like, got my Lawrence of Arabia. And I'm like, I've heard of the movie. I like Peter O'Toole. It just never sounded like anything I would enjoy. And thank God for this podcast, because I probably still may not have ever watched it. So I'm like you say you're grateful for Ben-Hur. I'm grateful for Lawrence of Arabia and you for introducing it to me, because I have to have it. I have to.
I'm so glad to hear that.
And the soundtrack, I finally put it together. I've been hearing the soundtrack for years. I'm like, this is what it's from.
Exactly.
I was so happy about that.
Even the scores are epic in our movies this week.
Yes. And I did not mention, but I do have Ben-Hur on vinyl. So there's that.
Nice. Well, now you need Lawrence of Arabia on vinyl.
I sure do.
I figured you'd really enjoy both aspects of this film, not only the grand adventure of it all, but also the psychological challenges that Lawrence faces. I figured you'd really enjoy as well.
I did very much, and I think it's so well written too. Like the dialogue is so damn good, and there's an actor in this movie that I can't wait for you to start discussing because
Yes.
he's been in a few picks of ours already, and I loved him in this movie. He's just again, everybody in the movie was great. Alec Guinness, everybody.
Everybody. And it's funny you say you really enjoyed the writing because, in fact, T.E. Lawrence was a real person.
Oh, no way.
This is loosely based on a true story, his autobiography called The 7 Pillars of Wisdom.
Oh, whoa.
And his brother was so enraged when he saw this film, he wouldn't let them use the title of the book for the movie.
Whoa. Really?
That's why it's called Lawrence of Arabia.
Interesting.
His brother and his friends vehemently disagreed with portraying him struggling with barbarism against the Turks.
Ah, okay.
And some of his bloodthirsty nature that pops up.
Sure.
They said that's absolutely not the Lawrence we knew. So this is very loosely based on the adventures of T.E. Lawrence.
Some liberties were taken.
Hollywood liberties, as we like to call them.
Similar to, yes, Braveheart.
Exactly.
Very Hollywoodized. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Still doesn't make it not good.
Absolutely. And now I want to read The 7 Pillars of Wisdom.
Oh my gosh. After we both read Aliens by V. Castro, we should book club that one. I would love to do that.
That was one of the best Christmas presents you got me. Thank you.
Oh, yes, of course.
And as you said, there's some great actors in this film. Peter O'Toole stars as T.E. Lawrence. I actually spoke about him in episode 4 because he is the king in Stardust.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He's much younger in Lawrence of Arabia. Oh, my good golly, is this man really fine in Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, that was the other thing I think I texted. Or no, I might have been watching Ben-Hur. I was like, Charlton Heston and Peter O'Toole had very facial similarities.
No, Peter O'Toole was way, way hotter.
No, I don't mean like in beauty. I just mean like they were both chisel-jawed, both bright-eyed.
Yes, they both
kind of had a similar smile.
Very bright blue eyes.
Yes.
Piercing.
Get lost in those oceans.
Yes. He also plays a king in the movie Troy, which you like.
I'm a big Troy fan, and I don't care who knows it.
And he also stars in the classic The Lion in Winter.
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
Oh, yeah. He plays King Henry II. He's great.
Oh, cool. I saw him in a movie years ago called Venus, and I liked that movie, actually. He's kind of a horny old man in that movie, but the movie was good.
Okay. Omar Sharif, as we said, plays Sharif Ali in this movie.
Yeah.
He, as you said, is Dr. Zhivago.
Mm-hmm. Which I have on double VHS, and I remember starting it, and I got 8 minutes in and turned it off. But now I got to watch it.
You do.
I absolutely do.
We're older
I kind of want to read
more
the
patient.
book, too. Yeah, but I know the book, I think, is like, it's kind of like Les Mis. It's like massive.
Oh, yeah. He also stars in Funny Girl, and he went back to the desert because he was in Hidalgo with Viggo Mortensen.
Oh, very cool.
And he also has a small part in a movie called The 13th Warrior, which is a guilty pleasure of mine that will absolutely be on this podcast. It stars Antonio Banderas. It's awesome.
That's right. You have mentioned that one a few times.
Yeah.
I have not seen it yet. I'll just wait until we get to it.
Please do.
All right.
Alec Guinness plays an Arabian prince in this film. Did not age well, of course.
No.
He, as everyone knows, is Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Well, of course I know him. He's me.
He's our only hope.
He really is. But his hair and makeup was so good
Yeah.
that when he walked around Jordan, several people who knew the prince mistook Alec Guinness for the real thing.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was the first Tropic Thunder moment.
It's not as bad as, say, John Wayne as Genghis Khan, or what's his name who's in the original Breakfast at Tiffany's. And
Mickey Rooney?
Mickey Rooney, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the Mickey Rooney
is bad. Is very, very bad.
Times.
This isn't as bad as that.
No.
So at least we have levels of badness.
Indeed.
And also Anthony Quinn and Jose Ferrer are in this movie.
Yes.
And I wanted to save this for last because we love this man so, so much.
Yay.
Claude Rains is in this movie.
Yeah. So good.
He plays Mr. Dryden, the ambassador who suggests Lawrence go to Arabia the first time.
Indeed. He actually very much reminded me of Captain Louis Renault a little bit from when he was in Casablanca.
Very much
in this
so.
movie. I loved that he showed up, and we got to see him in color.
We did, and he's this nice little power broker who sits in the corner and moves all the chess pieces. He's cool in this movie.
Very.
David Lean directed this film.
Yes, he did.
You mentioned him during your film.
I did.
And he also directed another classic film that will be a pick of mine in the future, The Bridge on the River Kwai.
Oh, yes.
Great, great movie.
I have that movie. I've never watched it.
Great.
We'll have to wait now.
Hold off. And Sam Spiegel produced this film. He also produced The African Queen.
Aha!
Which was my
the color version.
The color version, yes. Which was my pick in episode 74, and you can hear all about that conversation if you go back to 74.
You're never going to live it down.
I'm not. And he also produced On the Waterfront, which is funny because we were talking about Brando.
Oh, yeah.
And Bridge on the River Kwai.
Oh, sweet.
The other reason why I wanted to bring up Sam Spiegel is because we don't normally talk about producers on this show unless they're bigwigs, right? Or they're big names.
Right.
But he was born in Germany in 1901, so he was growing up during Nazis come to power, right? And he went to Hollywood for a year and came back to Berlin and started making German language versions of Hollywood films. That's how he got his start, yeah.
Oh, wow.
He produced All Quiet on the Western Front and made it in German.
Whoa.
It became this anti-war film, and it was a personal crusade for him. And on the opening night of the German version of All Quiet on the Western Front, the Nazis put a bomb in the cinema.
No fucking way.
Yeah, this guy was a badass. When the Nazis came into full power in Germany, he had to leave, and he moved to America and spent his time between Britain and America producing films.
Wow.
Yeah, he holds the record, along with Saul Zentz, of winning the most Academy Awards for Best Picture.
Damn.
Because he produced On the Waterfront, Bridge on the River Kwai, and Lawrence of Arabia. Spoiler, Lawrence won. We'll get to that. Saul Zentz was also a badass producer. He produced One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Sweet.
Amadeus.
Oh.
And The English Patient.
I have never seen The English Patient.
Neither have I, but it won Best Picture.
It did.
And Peter O'Toole loved acting with a lot of the men in this movie. He actually claimed that he learned more about acting from a couple days of filming with Jose Ferrer. He played the Turkish officer.
Yeah.
Than he did in all of his years at drama school.
Damn. That's awesome.
But he didn't get along with everyone. Peter O'Toole and Alec Guinness did not get along at all.
Oh, really? That's too bad.
And it's because Peter drank a whole lot during filming this movie.
Oh, did he really?
Yes, and I'll get into it in a minute, but before I do, I want to just mention this because there's a crazy connection to both our films. Peter O'Toole was not the first choice for this movie.
Okay.
It was turned down by Marlon Brando.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Thank God.
Thank God. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yes, I cannot imagine Brando playing this role.
No way. I gotta get the text. No.
A certain leading lady recommended Peter O'Toole to Sam Spiegel.
Ooh, who? You want me to guess?
Oh, I really, really do.
Oh, okay. Any hints at all?
We've talked about her multiple times. Remember, this is the golden age of cinema.
Yes.
She appears in color in one of my films.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Katharine Hepburn?
Katharine Hepburn recommended Peter
Hell
O'Toole.
Yeah. Very cool.
Mm-hmm. As I said, Alec Guinness and Peter O'Toole did not get along at all because Peter drank way too much during the filming of this movie. So much so that they were at a dinner together and Peter O'Toole started badgering the host so much that they got in a fight. And Alec Guinness was so embarrassed. He's like, fuck this guy.
Oh, damn.
Yes, so some of his drinking and misbehavior was a little bit legendary on this set.
Uh-oh.
During the raid of Aqaba, he and Omar were actually a little bit nervous about getting on their camels and just charging down this hill during this battle sequence, right? And so which by the way, they met and instantly bonded and became best friends for life. They were friends the entire time they were alive.
Oh, that's awesome.
Really good buddies. So they went off and got completely plastered drunk.
Oh.
Tied themselves to their camels.
Oh my gosh.
And then shooting commenced. And Peter said later on, decades later, he says, yeah, I don't even remember filming this.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Hell yeah, O'Toole.
When Peter O'Toole returns to the desert to go rescue Gassim,
Yeah.
He and Ayaz Johar were riding together on the same camel.
Right.
But David Lean, the director, saw that they were having trouble staying on the camel. And he cut and he's like, what the hell's going on? And on closer inspection, there was a very large block of marijuana on the camel.
Oh my gosh.
So they weren't fitting on the camel. Both Peter O'Toole and Ayaz Johar were completely stoned. And shooting had to be abandoned for the day.
Oh, jeez. That's crazy.
Because this was a massive shoot, it was shot in Jordan, Spain, and Morocco.
Oh, wow.
It spent 2 years in pre-production.
Wow.
Over 300 buildings were built for Aqaba.
Oh my gosh.
It took 14 months to film this movie.
14 months?
Yeah.
My God.
So it was grand behind and in front of the camera.
Hell yeah.
And Peter O'Toole was often injured during filming. Again, this is a great adventure. It's a really intense shoot. He also had been drinking. There's a combination of things to contribute to all this, but this is nuts. He received third-degree burns, which, of course, they're filming in the desert, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Tore ligaments in both his hips, broke his thumb, dislocated his spine, fractured his skull, was bitten by a camel, sprained his neck and both his ankles, tore a groin muscle, and was concussed twice.
Good Lord. Whoa.
Yeah. So this was a rough shoot for Peter.
Absolutely.
But let's not discount him completely. He did spend 3 months learning how to live as an Arab before any of this film was shot.
That's pretty cool.
He traveled across the desert with the Bedouin tribe, and he slept under the stars just as they did. So he really dedicated himself to this.
That's pretty sweet. That was one thing I was thinking of when watching the night desert stuff. I'm like, could you imagine just pulling a sleeping bag and looking up, like what you would see? Oh
Amazing.
My gosh. Hell yeah. Especially because then, I mean, I'm sure still out there now the sky is a lot cleaner and it's not, overrun with pollution. But wow, that would just be so epic. There's that word again.
Yeah. Omar Sharif was actually very well known in Egypt before he took this role. But when he screen tested, he tried to play Sharif Ali with a beard, but they didn't like it, and so then he was fitted with a mustache, and that's how he played the role. And it was so impactful and had such a great reception both in America and in Egypt. This role is the reason Omar Sharif had a mustache the rest of his life.
No way.
Yeah.
So that wasn't
awesome.
a real stash. I thought that was totally real.
Nope.
That's awesome. Was Alec Guinness's beard real, or was that
No,
fake?
it was fake too. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, because 20 years later, he's got one for Obi-Wan.
Yeah, but you've
so
seen the real
curious.
thing. It's straight and
it is.
blonde
it's not
and
as
boring, and he's got this full, awesome princely beard in Lawrence of Arabia.
True.
And Omar Sharif actually helped with the success of this film because it was banned in many Arab countries. Most Arab countries thought that this was going to be really insulting to them and their historical figures, and that the Arab peoples were going to be misrepresented. But Omar Sharif actually arranged a viewing for the president of Egypt at the time and showed him the film, and that there was nothing wrong with the way the Arabs were portrayed. And I absolutely agree.
Sweet.
This is a very non-whitewashed movie in a lot of ways, which I appreciate.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it was released in Egypt, and it became a big hit there too.
That's very cool.
There aren't as many extras in this film as Ben-Hur, but there are a lot. There are a lot of cool battle sequences, a lot of people riding horses and camels, and King Hussein of Jordan lent an entire brigade of his Arab legion to play extras and background in this movie.
Oh, that's cool.
Most of the film's soldiers are played by real soldiers.
Nice.
And King Hussein actually visited the sets quite often.
Oh, sweet.
He became interested in a young British secretary named Antoinette Garnier. She became his second wife in 1962.
Oh, wow.
And their eldest son is Abdullah II, the king of Jordan. He's literally the king now, and that's all because of Lawrence of Arabia.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah. And while filming in Jordan, every drop of water for the production was brought in by a truck from the nearest well, which was 150 miles away.
Holy God almighty.
This
that's nuts.
set was legit.
Hell yeah.
And they filmed in a lot of the historical places where T.E. Lawrence was. And on his first scouting trip to Jordan, David Lean actually discovered the remains of the Turkish locomotives and the railroad tracks that T.E. Lawrence had destroyed in real life.
What?
After 40 years, they weren't even rusted. That's how dry the desert is.
That is insane.
Isn't that insane?
That is wild. That is mind-blowing.
Yes.
So are they still there?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to go.
Yeah.
When we finish our Camino thing.
Yeah. And during the location shoot, after each rehearsal and take, 300 people from the Bedouin tribe wearing sandals, wrapped in wool, were responsible for smoothing out the desert sands with their feet and palm fronds.
Whoa.
And that's why the desert looks so perfect for every shot they needed.
That is wowzers.
And you talk about Omar Sharif's entrance, which is just badass, right?
Oh, hell yeah. So good.
There's a special 482 millimeter lens from Panavision that's used for the shot. Panavision still has the lens, and it's known among cinematographers as the David Lean lens.
Nice.
It was created specifically for this shot. But
That's awesome.
to anyone's knowledge, it hasn't been used since. So somebody needs to use that lens again to
Whoa.
make a cool entrance.
Definitely.
But unfortunately, even though this movie is 3 hours and 36 minutes long, not one woman has a speaking role in it.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's true. It is very man-full.
Man focus, it's the longest movie ever made not to have any dialogue spoken by a woman.
Wow.
Which kinda sucks.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does.
But it's still a good movie. It's just something to note.
Crazy.
This movie was nominated for 10 Oscars.
Awesome.
It should have been nominated for 11. Best Costume Design missed out because someone forgot to submit Phyllis Dalton's name for Best Costume.
Oh, that's terrible.
Isn't that shitty?
Yeah,
so
there were
bad
some
for her.
killer costumes in Lawrence of Arabia.
And she was a great designer. Phyllis Dalton actually designed T. Lawrence's uniform to be really ill-fitting to match the way he wasn't really fitting in with the British military, and to indicate Lawrence's struggle with his mental health throughout the movie and how it got progressively worse. His costumes actually get progressively thinner and more see-through as the movie progresses. And that was all her idea.
That's cool.
Yeah, and somebody forgot to submit her name for an Oscar. That's so
Terrible.
shitty.
That sucks.
Yes. But the 10 Oscar nominations that it did get, it won 7 of them.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. The nominees that it got that it didn't win were for Best Screenplay, Best Actor, Peter O'Toole did not win that year, and Best Supporting Actor, Omar Sharif did not win, which sucks because he totally deserved it too.
Oh, hell
They
yeah.
both did. The Oscars that it did win, though, were Best Score, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, Art Direction, Cinematography, which well deserved.
Oh, hell yeah.
Best Director, and Best Picture.
Absolutely fantastic, and completely agree with all of them.
Nice. And like your film, this one has been restored.
Yes, it has.
In 1989, this was fully reconstructed and restored by Robert Harris and Jim Paynton. They got permission from Columbia Pictures. Guess how much footage was delivered to their door?
Oh, boy. I'm going to say over 1 million feet.
Think of it in weight.
Weight, let's say I'm going to go with 42 pounds.
4 tons of extra footage was delivered to their door.
4 tons. Holy shit.
It took them nearly a year to get through all of it.
Wow.
And when they restored it, they even employed all of the surviving actors to re-record dialogue when needed.
I noticed a little bit of definitely some ADR moments, but that's okay. It happens in movies like this.
It does, and it's cool that they brought all the original actors back who are still alive to do it.
Very, very cool.
This movie had a budget of $15 million, just like yours.
Yeah.
Worldwide gross was $70 million.
Oh, very close.
Very close to yours.
Awesome. Hell yeah.
And this is Steven Spielberg's all-time favorite film.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Look at that. That's awesome. It's certainly on my top 50.
Ben-Hur is now on my top 50.
Hell yeah.
I'm so glad you enjoyed this film.
Me too.
Unfortunately, it's not streaming for free anywhere. However, you can rent it for $3.99 on Amazon, and John and I joked this week that it's basically only a penny a minute because these films are so long.
Pretty much.
And those are our epic Best Picture winners this week.
Oh, so much fun discussing these. Just eye-popping information on both ends. You're like, wow. I love Lawrence of Arabia even more.
Right? You gotta love practicality.
Hell yeah.
So good. I'm so glad we covered these.
Me too. Can't wait to watch them again.
Right?
And then do another epic episode in like 6 months. V, would you watch Lawrence of Arabia with your grandmother?
Oh, God, yes. I mean, it came out during prime time for her to be watching movies as well.
There you go.
It's one of those dad movies, right? I mean, I'd watch this Lawrence of Arabia with my dad in 2 seconds. And John, would you watch Ben-Hur with your grandma?
I would have loved to. I know my grandmother was a fan because my grandfather actually was a fan, and my grandfather is the reason why I have the vinyl. He left it for me when he passed away.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to our very epic episode. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and hope that you're now excited to either revisit or watch for the first time these very deserving Best Picture winners.
I hope so too. Yes, please do check them out. And when you do, or if you have seen these movies already, let us know what you think. Which one's the better one, Ben-Hur?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Let us know.
No, they really are both. They're both like on a completely different level of filmmaking, and the fact that they're not even 5 years apart from each other is just magnificent. And I love movies.
Golden age of cinema, baby.
Hell yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for being such epic listeners. We really appreciate you, and please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. It really helps us out. And why don't we discuss what we're doing next week?
I like that idea.
Little bit of a palate cleanser after the heavy movies, well, at least long movies that we saw this week.
Yes, indeed. I chose a movie from 1997. I've seen this movie multiple times. My father showed me this movie, I think when I was about 15. It's one of my dad's favorite movies. I remember getting it for him for Christmas and asking him when I could watch it because it was R-rated. And that movie stars John Cusack, Minnie Driver, Dan Aykroyd, Jeremy Piven. This is Grosse Point Blank, everybody.
I love that film so much.
So fantastic. It is not streaming for free anywhere, but you can rent it on Apple or Amazon for $3.99. I will be watching my DVD copy. And Vee, what did you choose?
My pick for our killer rom-com episode
Ha-ha!
is a movie that came out a couple years after yours.
Yes.
In the year 2000. It stars Bruce Willis, Matthew Perry, and it's called The Whole Nine Yards.
Nice. I have not seen that movie in some time, so I'm looking forward to the revisitation of that one.
Good. Well, if you have a Starz subscription, you can stream it for free. Otherwise, you can rent it.
I will watch my DVD copy.
Even better.
Yeah.
Well, that about wraps us up this week here on Movies You Missed podcast. And as all of you know, we like to end each episode with film is a form of art, and in art, every opinion is valid, except if you think
movies need to be under 3 hours.
Well, we proved that wrong this week. Nicely done.
Indeed. And this year at the Oscars as well. 3
Yes.
Best Picture winners are 3 hours plus long.
Love it. I really enjoy diving deep into either the story or the characters. I always want more. So if you're going to make a movie and you really want to tell a rich story, make it over 3 hours long. I'll be happy.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
See you next week. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.